Welcome to this episode of Inside the Gym podcast. Today we have our special guest of Tom Eilerman, and I am very excited that we are going to be talking about a lot of different things and getting really inside the mind of Tom and his experience all through the generations of the gym equipment manufacturing side of the business. Tom's got old school experience. He's got new school experience. So he's going to give us a wealth of knowledge, and I'm super excited. So, Tom, can you, for anybody who doesn't know who you are, just kind of give us a little background about, who you are and where you came from and, all of that?
Okay. And Chris, thanks for having me on. It's an honor. I've listened to a few of your podcasts, and I've been on a few here lately, so this is kind of cool. I am Tom Eilerman. I was the founder and owner of Nebula Fitness Equipment, which I started back in about 1988, and I was in the military, got out of the military, decided I want to go back in the military and fly helicopters. I had signed back up, and I joined a gym in Ohio that happened to be Mr. Ohio's gym, Jeff Lauber, and I started training there. And while I was there, he goes, "Hey, dude, you're a welder." And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, I need a leg press. Can you build a leg press?" He showed me this picture. And I said, "Yeah." So on my lunch hour, I'd buy scrap metal at work, and I built this leg press. And then a buddy of his saw it, and I built a couple pieces for him, who actually ended up being a partner with Larry Pacifico. And they had me build some more equipment. And I'm like, okay, I said, there's a business here. I think this could be cool. I found a loophole to get out of my military hitch. I was actually going to go back in and fly helicopters. So I started my business. My mom and I found this building in Versailles, a 17,000 square foot building that we bought, and we turned it it was the Versailles Health and Fitness Center when we opened it. Later on, we had changed the name to Nebula Fitness Center. It was our showroom. But there was a little 20 by 50 garage on the side of this building, and that was my little weld shop. I mean, anything that was built, like all the stuff you saw, quads, the original leg presses and hack, were all built in that little shop by me.
Oh, wow.
And my adopted father retired in 1995, and my nephew had gotten kicked out of the Army, and he needed a job. He was a welder. And so I ended up hiring my dad. I hired my nephew. And it was funny, by the end of 95, we had built a pole barn outside of town through one of the owners of Quads became my partner, Tom Eilerman. He became 20% partner, and we had 10 employees working, and it just kind of started from there. I mean, from 88 to from 88, 89, I was building some basic pieces, nothing fancy. Then I ended up running into John Perillo by a fluke, and I built Perillo's equipment for 3 years. So that's where I really learned. That was kind of my college of how to build hardcore gym equipment. John had the original 45-degree leg press. It was like 12 urethane tires, like a roller coaster. It was smooth, it was steep angle. He had the 3-angle deck. And John and I had brought a lot of ideas to the table, but I was just a young kid. That was stupid. Now there's no good ideas. I talked about linears on the leg press. Oh no, you can't do that. And then like the T-bar row that the humbler that everybody uses, like Arsenal copied with the swiveling handles. I was making my T-bar, my chest support one was going to be mine. And he goes, "We ought to put swivel handles on, like our swivel chin grip." So I did, and ended up becoming, a pretty ominous piece. I mean, it's been nicknamed the humbler because the strength curve is on it. A big guy could put 225s or 245s on, and if you can do that, you're a pretty strong dude.
Yeah.
So Perillo and I didn't see eye to eye, and I kind of divorced him, and I was looking at just getting out of it. I was going to sell my welders. We had the gym going on. I had actually taken the test to be a state trooper, which I didn't even tell David this story. I had taken the test to be a state trooper prior to starting the gym. And we were involved with the gym about 3 years. It was about the time Pearl and I were about done with each other. And I got my notice, if you want to go be a trooper, you can take the test. And at that time, if you weren't 6'5" and black, that was Ohio. I was 5'10" and I was a white guy. My chances of making trooper were slim back then. So I chose to stay in it. And I ended up in this phone call from some dude up in Michigan, Ram Fitness. He had seen my Nebula work. He'd seen the Perillo stuff. He wanted me to build a couple pieces of equipment. So I did. I sat back and looked at him, and I'm like, you know what? You're good at this. You like it. Let's see if you can launch your own product line. And that was prior to the name Nebula coming into the fold. My shop was called Protoweld, and I was like Protoweld Fitness Equipment. And I was looking for a name, and I'm watching Star Trek, and Khan is chasing Kirk, and Kirk flies the Enterprise into the Matara Nebula. And I'm like, Nebula, Nautilus, Nebula. That's it. That's the name. And that is exactly how I picked the name for Nebula, was watching Star Trek. You see up in my wall up there, that black case has got two of Leonard Nimoy's prosthetic ears in it from leftover from the 1978 motion picture film. So those things are worth money. They're over 40 years old. They're signed by Steve Neal, the makeup artist. So yeah, I'm a big Trekkie on top of being a gym guy.
Nice.
But after I started, I redesigned the leg press after working with Perillo, because I had built a couple leg presses prior to that, and I know Dodd from up in Northern Ohio bought the second one I ever built off of my buddy Tony. If you've seen the white and blue leg press and hack squat on my Instagram post, that's his gym. He had that original leg press. But so I didn't like the 45 degrees angle. I liked the 35. I put linears on it. Originally, we didn't have the wheels underneath the sled. The first one I put in the gym, we loaded it up. We're working out. We loaded it up more. And the deck was about a quarter inch off the rails, and it hit the rails and it scraped. And I'm like, oh, crap, can't have this. So I was used to using the wheels, the urethane wheels from Perillo. So I just slapped some mounts underneath there and put two wheels up underneath the sled. And that solved the deflection problem of the rods when they got loaded up. And that is how the iconic Nebula leg press came to be. Now, to explain to all the people out there what the generations are, because people send me pictures. What generation is this, Tom? And is it a Gen 1, 2, 3, or actually Gen 4 will be the new TKO Defiant leg press. That's what I'm going to call that. But Gen 1 was the linear bearing sled with the three angles on it. That was Gen 1. Gen 2, we went to two angle deck, and we took the bolt-on pillow block Thompson bearings off and put them inside a steel tube, and now they were encased in a nice tube, what you see. The Gen 2 went through a couple evolutions, like we broke the frame. Instead of being a solid welder frame, we were getting into deliveries where you couldn't make corners if it was all in one big piece. So we found that out the hard way. We had to bring a leg press home from Moorhead University and cut it and bolt it back together to be able to get it in the door over there. So basically, that was the changes in the Gen 2, and it stayed that way. We built that leg press like that probably from 93, because Gen 1 was from about 1992 to about late 93. Then I switched to the Gen 2 and two angled. Well, I built the leg press with enclosed bearings for a while, and then we took the three angle deck off and put the two angle deck on, and we built that up until about 2000. I think it was right around 2000 we switched to the new bearing system. We kept getting requests for the ISO leg press, and the ISO leg press on the old model, if you pulled the pin, the sled wanted to deflect like this, and to solve that problem, I chose rail mount linears, which became the Gen 3. If I'm going to use them on one leg press, I went ahead and used them on the hack and the regular leg press. And they could hold weight, they performed good, but they were never as smooth. They had a more raspy sound to them. The 1 inch bearing instead of an inch and a quarter. The underslung bearings, it was just a different feel. And when I got lucky enough to be hired by TKO 3 years ago, in fact, yesterday would have been my 3-year anniversary. I'm starting on year 4 for TKO, and we now have, I'm going to call it the Gen 4 leg press, but it's really the Gen 2 leg press brought back to life. some upgrades, a lot of little upgrades to things. As being a gym owner, you see all the mistakes of equipment companies. And I owned the Nebula showroom for 20 years before we sold it. It's still in operation, 37 years since I opened it. But, like on a leg press, all my leg press tubes were straight. And I started making my horns point up at 3 degrees. So when people were slamming the sleds down and banging on the spring stops, the plates wouldn't fall off. Well, when I came back to this new Gen 4/Gen 2 leg press, we welded the back tubes on at a 3 degree up tilt. The tubes bolt in, they're stainless, buff stainless steel, 1/4 inch thick, stainless. So they all bolt in, and you now have got all stainless weight tubes, all the bolt on weight tubes, everything's pointed up at 3 degrees. So no matter how much abuse the leg press gets, you're not going to see plates fall off and hurt somebody.
Yeah.
The spring stops that you were familiar with, now they got ABS plastic inside, so there's no metal to metal contact. I mean, all the handles used to squeak when you'd open them up. Now we got bronze bushings and ITG bushings in these things, so now they're quiet. And it's funny, I'm a vet. I'm big on American made. I almost, it was a hard thing to take the job with TKO in the beginning because things were made overseas. And I wanted to keep things American made, but the way things are going in society now, you really don't have that option. We ran 22 leg presses, and it is so much more expensive. I mean, our build cost was nearly $6,000 on these. And for me to try to sell them up against Arsenal, we couldn't. But that leg press did have an adjustable foot plate on, which gave you 4 different foot angles. And I think we're going to bring
the limited edition one.
What's that?
Is that the limited edition one?
Yeah, that was the one that was TKO Defiant that had to keep
right
on. And
I think I've used 3 of those.
What's that?
I think I've used 3 of those.
What do you think of it?
I thought it was a great leg press.
Yeah, and being able to adjust the foot plate was a game changer.
Mm-hmm.
First person I showed the rendering to was Ed Cohen at the Arnold about 4 years ago, and Eddie goes, "Oh my God, that will be a game change, especially for me since I've had all these knee and ankle issues. To be able to adjust the deck to fit the user, not trying to fit the machine around the user." And when David Scott and I were working out on it at the factory and testing it, we put the seat all the way up, and we put the deck in the 4th position, which was a new position that was not part of the 3-angle deck. It was the exact same feel as a vertical leg press, a Nebula vertical leg press. So if you couldn't afford 2 leg presses, you had one that did it. You just had to put the seat and the foot deck all the way up, and you had a vertical leg press. And it's a good unit. We're actually getting our new sales director, Shane Hensley at Defiant Strength, owned by TKO, has been getting requests about it. So I think we'll probably bring it back. We wanted to launch the Nebula Classic line, which we did, which is the leg press, the hack squat, and the vertical leg press. There's a few other pieces we brought back from Nebula, but we didn't put the Classic on them, like glute hand and the benches, because we're doing changes. But, the subtle changes I did to the hack squat, like putting the handles up here instead of having them down where you had to reach for them in the frame.
Right.
There's some things that really need to be done, but it didn't change the Gen 2 hack, design itself. I made a bigger foot deck, and we made a few more holes. So now I had a guy on there the other day. I thought he was 5'7". He was only 5'4", and Zach was getting real deep, and he was just touching the spring stops. So that's a good, successful venture when you get somebody really small or short like that can go really butt deep, butt to heel deep, and not bottom out. So those are going to be some good pieces.
Oh yeah, definitely. Now, so you mentioned a couple of the leg presses and a couple of the leg pieces. Now that you're with Defiant, are you guys doing any of the upper body pieces or models that you used to do with Nebula? I got a chance to use a couple of them up at America's Gym in Chicago. And
oh yeah, Brian's place. Yeah,
Brian had a couple of your old Nebula chest presses.
Yeah, he had. Well, in fact, the vertical chest press he's got is the one that I redid for Arsenal. So, they're basically the same thing. The only difference was Arsenal made the arms lock in. You could lock the positions, where ours you could pull the pop pins, rotate them 90 degrees, and they would lock open, and it would be the free form, because I had to beat the hammer patent back in the day, and I came up with a free form. So you would control the movement of the movement arms while you went through the press. That's how I got around the patent. Well, I mean, what we were doing at TKO, now TKO owns Defiant Strength. Defiant Strength was a name I came up with, and I was going to start my own company, but it's impossible to work a full-time job and try to open up another company. And I just shelved it, and the opportunity to come work for TKO came along, and the owners liked the name. So I sold the name and rights to them, and we decided the angle we were going to go with the Defiant line. Because I'm the director of engineering for TKO Strength and Performance. So I design all the new TKO equipment. I design all the new Defiant stuff. Now, granted, you'll see on the new Defiant line, there is leverage equipment that we picked a Chinese line that was very good, that was in round tubing, and we had them build it in square tubing. So the new stuff I'm doing matches the leverage until I can get to the point of, I mean, I've been working 3 years and we've got 30 pieces done. It takes a while to get these things up and designed. I've got an engineer that works on the other side of the room here with me for TKO. And, thank goodness I've got an assistant, because it takes a lot of time to do models and get the stuff right, and then do production drawings and get it ready for our factories overseas. But we wanted to launch the athletic line, the school market, the racks, the platforms, the leg presses. That was another reason we chose to do the more simple leg press, the Gen 2 with a fixed foot plate on it, because the school market that we wanted to hit, that our dealers really needed, did not, we didn't want complicated. But you can do the college level, the D1 schools, and we are getting requests. Hey, we've been on that leg press, so I don't think it's going to be in that far future. I'll just send the plans over for the sled. The leg presses are identical. The sled on the new one we've launched, the Nebula Classic, is identical to the one with the adjustable foot plate, but the one with the adjustable foot plate had a 6-inch welded piece of tread plate on the bottom of it, and then it had the adjustable hinge mechanism and the pop pin in the back.
Right, yeah.
Basically, took that off, put the 2-angle deck on, 2 gussets in back, welded the tube between the upper tube, and we're back to a Gen 2. So the framework, the handle, everything is identical on both of them. So it would not be hard to bring back that sled, and then we'd have an option for people. And for me, I'd almost be like a few $100s more. Why not have an adjustable leg press? But
yeah, definitely, especially one that's that adjustable.
Yeah, and if you've got to try it, it's definitely got a good feel, and it's nice when you're in the first position, and because even on the Prillo or the Gen 1 with the 3 angles, you had about 6 inches of flat foot plate, and then your foot bent to the middle section that was about 7 inches, and then the top was 12 inches. So the bottom two, you could never put your entire foot flat. And I had that complaint a lot, and that is what generated me to make the switch to a 2-angle deck. And I think in all the years that we built leg presses with that new deck, I had one guy come in and wanted me to weld a flat 12-inch plate in the middle, which brought it back to the Gen 1 sled, basically. I got a phone call one time, and I get people wanting to modify leg presses. It was like, no, I'm not going to do it. Now, it's one thing when we did an NBA team and we had to add an extra foot at the top for a 7-footer. That was a simple fix.
Right.
But I get this call, and he goes, "Yeah, we need to do some testing and stuff, and we'd like to have you modify a leg press." I took his number down. We were busy loading trucks. We had a big container going to Dubai. So I called this guy back, and he says, "Yeah, I'm so-and-so. I work for, I forget the laboratory's name now, Wiley's Laboratory in Houston." And I said, "What do you guys do?" So, we're part of the Houston Space Center. We test all the astronauts before they go up in space, when they come back. And he had me at, okay, whatever you want, if it has to do with space, I'm all in. So we had to strip a leg press sled down to weigh very little, because they had this testing unit. They would do explosive movements on the sled, and they would measure the strength curve and how fast they could accelerate the sled. Then when they would come back from space, being for 3 months, 6 months, or a year, they would then do the same tests, and they would see how much strength and muscularity that the astronaut would lose in the weightless atmosphere. So,
right.
And they ended up buying 2 more of them. And I just basically doubled the price of the leg press. I was making great money, but hey, I was part of the space program. Live long and prosper.
Nice. That's super cool. You mentioned the developing a piece of equipment and the process. Could you go into that a little bit more? Because I don't think a lot of people out there really understand like what it takes from the time that you get an idea, or even if it's a piece that's been built before, it's not a completely original idea, from like idea to when it goes to production.
And it depends on the piece. Now, see, I had started working on redoing the leg press prior to going to work for TKO. So I was trying to come up, because I actually, I had heard through the grapevine that the reason I wasn't with other companies was that I was too old to contribute. And that kind of didn't sit well with me. So I pretty much had to give a burr up my, to get back in the industry. So that's where, Defiant Strength is our new logo, but the name Defiant Strength was, I'm going to defy the odds, I can come back. But I also wanted to catch my Star Trek hook. The little runabout on Deep Space Nine was the Defiant. So I had my Star Trek hook to the name, but then I also, the meaning of Defiant was, I'm going to defy, if people think I can't come back or I don't have anything to contribute, I'll prove that wrong, which has been done. And our logo, like, Arsenal has like the A in the bullet thing. Mine is the eagle flying, and it's got like a half moon. It's flying over the valley, over the mountains, way above my competitors. And my nickname in Nebula was the Big Eagle, because I could walk through the shop and look through a pile of welded frames and go, hey, that's messed up. You got to fix that. And they're like, how can you tell that? I'm like, this doesn't look right. And so for Christmas that year, they bought me a big concrete eagle and name tag for my desk, the Big Eagle. So nice. That's why my wife says, why don't you use the eagle? And that's where that came from. But anyways, back to your question. Like when I was working on the leg press, when I actually was employed at TKO, I had a lot of concept work done and was working back and forth. And I had really changed the frame. It wasn't going to look like a Nebula leg press. And I'm like, you know what? People know me for that. If I'm going to bring it back, I'm going to bring it back like with all the stops pulled out, hence the adjustable leg press foot plate. And I had 400 hours in modeling on that. And it was 200 hours. Let's see, no, let me think about this. It was 125 hours of modeling. It was 130 hours of production prints. Since we were building America, I had to design all the fixturing and stuff for them. So by the time we were done with all the fixturing and everything to produce this first leg press, I had 400 hours in it. And just take $100 an hour for an average engineering fee for, an engineering company, and you got $40,000 wrapped up in designing that piece of equipment. Wow. Now, the hack squat took me maybe 40 hours to design, because I basically stole the frame from the leg press, changed what needed to be changed on it, built the sled. So initially the second iteration of it didn't take as long. But if it's like a weight stack piece, it's complex, it's going to take about 3 weeks to a month of work on it, 40-hour to 45-hour weeks. I mean, I can do benches in a couple of days. I'm working on new Olympic benches, kind of a version of the Nebula with a new twist to them. And I'm stuck on the hook design right now, because we want to use like the plastic injected molded covers that go over the metal hooks that are in the tube frame. But I also would like the old school bench hooks like I had Nebula. So in some places we're going to use that style, and I want to do another injection molded cover that will go over the old style. So like on a shoulder press, I can use the newer hook style with the older hook style in concert together. They look like they flow, but the hooks are taking, I've been working on them a week and a half, and I'm like, it's like, it's a hook, but sometimes you start, you move, you get an idea, it changes, and you got to go back. And sometimes it's a slow process. Sometimes it's a quick process, but anywhere from 2 weeks to 4 weeks of modeling time. Then I hand it off to my engineer, and he goes, and you got about the same amount of time modeling as you do taking it to production prints, doing all the blueprints for each part, each assembly, sub-assembly. So that's kind of how the time process goes. Where do I get my ideas? I've been doing this since 1988. So I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of companies, come and go. You were mentioning before that, there's a guy that's got rights for Body Masters and bring the old pieces back. There's a lot of good pieces that Icarian had, like Flex's ham tractor, best machine out there. The Nebula Gen 2 leg press hack squat. There's a handful of Nebula pieces that I had made that were always up in those top 10 or 15 lists of greatest pieces of all time of free weight. But then you got, like I train at my old gym, and they got an old Icarian lying leg curl. Nothing fancy to look at, but I'm telling you what, it's the best feeling leg curl that I've ever been on in my entire career. And it's simple. It was a model right about the time they were switching over to Precor. That was that smaller frame, but it feels good. Now, when I go to design a leg curl for Selector Eyes, I will probably pull in the simple geometry from that machine, and then change the arm and all that kind of stuff. One thing I'm a fan of. I am a big fan of center pull leg extensions and leg curl, the old school way. A lot of these machines that it comes off from the right and is over top of you, they end up being bent like this. So one leg's higher than the other when you're doing your exercise, unless they really beef it up. And I've seen some, companies really execute their product well, and I've seen some that weren't so good. So, but that's kind of and I look at everything. I mean, I'll look at on my headset how they did a hinge movement, and it might give me an idea for something. I mean, I look at everything. Gym equipment. I do side work for an agricultural companies, which after we get off the podcast, I'll go eat and I'll get back in that. I'm designing for a $500,000 corn planter, 220-gallon side lower frame tanks, all out of stainless steel that holds caustic fertilizer. So I have a couple genres. I used to work in a conveyor factory after I had shut Nebula down in 2010, and I had an advertising business and IT background.
Oh wow!
When Rogue called me back to work, I was like, okay. I worked for them for a year, worked for Arsenal or USA Strength for a year, Dynamic for 4 months. When I was laid off, I immediately found a job working for a conveyor factory that we did. It was an alternative fuel company. They would inject tires into the cement kilns to burn to offset the natural gas usage. So they were getting rid of rubber tires that were a problem. And the LaForge company up in Canada, up in Nova Scotia, I flew up there and had to measure the entire plant. I designed, this entire plant. So I've got a lot of experience in a lot of other things other than gym equipment, but all that, pardon the pun, is part of my arsenal of tool design that I use, and nothing's off the table. I mean, I can see a toy and see an idea on a toy that could be a good mechanism or a concept of a mechanism for, say, a Smith machine. You're sitting in front of a Smith machine, So that's kind of the process, and it may start out looking like one thing, and then the best thing for me to do is set it aside and not look at it for 2 weeks and come back to it. Because if you're staring at the same unit for days or weeks on end, it's like that change or what you really need is just like flying right over your head. And you come back to it and you're like, oh, what the heck was I thinking? It would stare me right in the face, and I couldn't even figure it out, So sometimes it's good to come back to a project later on, or we go through the prototype process, and it's like, I need to tweak this. Oh, I didn't even think about doing it this way, and so we've got a really great process with our factories in China. We have 3 employees that are on our payroll. I work with this Eric every day, and we email back in Skype, and then he'll be in the factory, and he'll send me videos and stuff of something if he's got a question on it. And, we're able to dial things out that way. I actually was in China back in April for 8 days. The sales team and myself went there. We had 15 prototypes that we were launching for Defiant, and we wanted to just go do it all at one time. that was a very interesting trip. Never in a million years would I thought I'd been stepping foot in China. But
That actually brings up my next question was because I was going to ask you about China because you and I had talked about China a couple times in previous conversations. And as I go around to different gyms and talk to different people about different types of equipment, as you mentioned, like the Defiant stuff is being made in China. And as I go around, a lot of people are like, oh, that's just some Chinese piece of crap. But can you explain to people who don't understand, like, why just because something's made in China doesn't mean it's a worse piece of equipment than something that's made in America, and why it could potentially have been a better piece of equipment?
Well, I'm going to probably piss some people off with this next few statements, and I would have probably ticked myself off 3 years ago, but I'm a conservative. I voted for the guy that's our next president. He's done a lot for our economy. He wants to bring back manufacturing. There's going to be tariffs involved. They want to tariff all the stuff coming in from overseas, different countries, in his idea to promote bringing stuff back to America. Well, I tried to make that limited edition in America. I found a shop, and actually it was a shop that was probably the least expensive I could find, had powder coating, everything involved with it. But their quality was not there. They could not do the quality. Even at Nebula, we were one product line, and everybody knew their job. From the grinding cleanup guys to the powder coaters, the assemblers, or whatever. Everybody knew their job, and everybody had been there a while. But now you try to take a product line to a new factory that has never seen fitness equipment and that doesn't have an ISO 9000, type of system set up. And I had to babysit them. They had such turnover in welders. Every time we run about 8 of them, and then that guy would quit, and I'd have to go over there for 2 weeks and spend time retraining the welder because the foreman was never around, and it shouldn't be our job for me to go over on TKO's time and train somebody to do this. So after we saw what the prices were on building it here, and they did a good job, don't get me wrong, but there were little things that the ants that crawl around in the grass, that crawl up your foot and bite you, those are the things that were going wrong. This little things that weren't tight. So when I went to China in April of 24, and we toured some of the factories. Now, I have a large medical company near me that's a $1 billion company, state-of-the-art factory, really great. I was in a couple of factories there that made that look like the Nebula shop compared to Midmark. And the problem is, our wages are so high here. And since COVID happened, people have gotten lazy, and it's hard for employers to even find people that show up for a job. 5 years before COVID, people were begging for jobs. Now the employers are begging to get people to work and even come to work.
Right.
So, I go over there, I meet the people. The people are really great. Like the average factory worker makes about $12,000 American, which correlates over to here about $50,000 if you want to equal wage. They're living the same as a guy that over in China is living the same as the guy over here in America making 50 grand at 12 grand. But it's different cost of living. Materials are different. I mean, it's about 20% of the cost to build something over there. Between 30 and 20. Some things are 20%, some 30%. It just depends on the complexity of it. But I'm walking down a row in a factory that's 200,000 square foot, and they've got 30 tubing benders that are all fairly new, state of the art. Lasers to cut tubes, state of the art. Brake press. I mean, stuff that I would drool to have in a factory over here.
Right.
And they're building hundreds of parts, everyone, and they check the tolerances on this stuff. Their quality control over there. Now, granted, there are some fly-by-night factories over there, don't get me wrong, but the ones that we use are very high quality. And the fact that we have 3 of our own employees that live there that are that do our quality control, that is why we can have such tight quality. If you live here or your company here and you send it over to get built and you do not have your guy in the trenches over there, well, yeah, things can get missed. Or, well, you get an order in, well, that's not quite what I expected. Me and Eric talk every day, and if he doesn't approve it or if I don't approve it, it doesn't get built. That's my job, to build the top equipment we can. And right now, China is beating America in a lot of places, and we need to step up our game. We've got to get our costing down, because that's the gap. That's the chasm. They can put 100% tariffs on, so if it costs you $2,000 to build in China, now we're paying $4,000. I'm still going to pay $6,000 to have it built in America. It's still cheaper to build it overseas than it is to build here. So there's got to be some fundamental infrastructure changes to how things are done here. And I would love to see it come back. But, you can't even start a factory up, because you got systems, how you run a factory, just a production, how things goes from point A to point B. I mean, every process, there's people that run all that. I mean, it's just not a welder and a fabricator or laser runner. You got 30, 40 people in the fabrication department and supervisors that have to run this. And what I saw over there, every single factory we visited that does steel tube product, not like we've got dumbbells and barbell plate factories I went to too. And I learned a lot. I mean, I saw bumpers being made. I had no clue how a bumper plate was made. And I was like, wow. And like your BOSA bands, your rubber stretch bands, one of the companies over there, they make 90% of all the bands that come to America here. I've got to see the process. It looks like a big flat inner tube. They got it on this big wheel, and they got a little knife in there, and it cuts them to the width, like 2 inches wide or an inch wide, in a different color. And then they go upstairs, and the little lady silk screens on the logo, and then another little lady packs it in the bag and puts it in the box, and they go off to shipping. So the processes are tight for the way they do things over there. So when somebody says that if it's made in China, it's junk, I'm going to call bull on that, because I've been there, I've seen it, and their factories are much better than a lot of ours. And I would put up anything I did in Nebula against what I'm doing in Defiant now, and actually say the quality is better. And the attention to detail is there. Now, of course, we have to break things down to get them in the containers. Instead of having a welded leg press wedge, we've got two sides. But even like Arsenal, they did that for running it through their paint lines. You got a right, left side, you got a couple cross members to bolt the wedge together, then the sled and all the other components together to build a unit. Just because it's got bolts in it doesn't mean it's junk. You've got to, I can get 30 leg presses in a container if I bolt them, break them down. I get 6 in a container if it's 20 foot, and 12 in a container if it's a 20 or a 40-foot container. So their packaging, I mean, this stuff comes in. I'm unpacking the leg press and hack squat over at Tony's gym, and there's enough styrofoam in there that I could build dioramas for HO train sets for the next 30 years. I mean, everything is packed. It's got plastic around, plastic bags. It's packed in styrofoam. It's cardboard. Intricate stuff, and it doesn't get scratched. So, when you get something from us, you're going to get a good price on it, and we're keeping our pricing down, but you also have to assemble it. If if somebody wants a leg press put together for them, either the dealer they're buying it from is going to have to do that, or they're going to have to do it themselves. And it's not hard. We do our instruction manuals. It's not hard. And I could walk anybody through, the piece of equipment if they're having trouble, but we can save you freight. You may ship it from Houston to New York for $400. I ship a hack and a leg press from Houston to Ohio for Tony's gym for $650. I couldn't ship one assembled leg press for that price. So, there's a little give and take to save, and less chances for things to get dinged up if it's all protected in boxes. So that is my answer on the Chinese factories. They are state of the art. They're putting out high quality stuff, and I have spec'd my stuff. I don't want 4mm tubing or 2.5mm tubing. The difference between 2.5mm tubing and 3mm tubing is 11 gauge versus 14 gauge. And I've had them we don't use. I'm spec'ing this tubing. That's what you're going to use. I'm now used to 10mm 3/8, 12mm ½ inch. So I'm building these things just like I did Nebula. Heavy, thick gussets. There are some places I was able to tone it down. It was a little overkill, but the thing is, you also look at a machine. If I've got all my pieces are 10mm or 3/8 inch thick, well, I can make more of my parts out of 3/8 because when they nest them in the laser and they're cutting all these parts out for the machines, the more different thicknesses of material you got, the more changes they got to go. which ups your production costs. So there's a lot of things that go in the design phase that is just not the machine itself and the kinesiology behind that machine. Then we got to think about being a gym owner, 20 years. There are a lot of idiots in the gym. You see some of those videos where the guys are hanging upside down and they look like they're doing acrobats. Well,
I find it's funny. Most of those videos, people are in purple gyms.
Yeah, I wonder what gym that is. I'm not going to name no names, right?
Right.
But as a gym owner, like I'm walking, I used to build the Perillo weight trees. They were 5 pegs, and the 2.5 pound deuce was on the top. So my mom and I are running the gym, and I come in one day to work out, and here's a single tree without a damn weight on it except a 45 pound plate on the top peg where the deuces are supposed to be at. And if my mom would have tried, and my mom was 55 when we opened the gym and 75 when we closed down, she couldn't lift that up. It fell over on her foot. So I immediately changed my tree design to 6 tubes or 3 tubes horizontal. And just, you see dumb things. So I have to think about, how can somebody hurt themselves on this piece of equipment I'm designing? That the average person wouldn't, but there's going to be Bubba or somebody that's going to stick their finger somewhere or pull something wrong, or they're going to set something on it, and try to factor all that in when you're designing. And you can make it as dummy proof as possible. If there's going to be that one guy or that one gal or that one whoever that's going to put their finger in where it shouldn't be, and now they're going to be walking around like this. And you can't train stupid out of people. And some people just don't know. They don't have common sense. Something's moving. They got their hand here and they get whacked by the Smith machine arm or something, First thing you want to do is sue. Well, you know what? You were stupid. You shouldn't put your hand there. But in today's society, they got ambulance chasers. So you got to put warning labels over everything. So the very last thing I do when I'm designing a piece of equipment is toss all the warning labels on it. So when I do my renders for the catalog or renders for the site before we have live photos, it's got all that stuff on, and they got all the little words on them. And then we have the files that we send over to China that shows them right where to put everything, because there's a lot of thought goes in these machines. I mean,
yeah.
I did all this in 2D auto. I first started out in college with a drafting board. So when I was working for Perillo, there was no computer. I'm on the big old drafting board with a big old thing that moved like that, and I'm doing the pencil thing, and we had to make a change, got the eraser out. Now I would run that blueprint up to the lumber yard. It was on like a cellophane paper, and they would run it through their copier that made blueprints. So I would make the blueprints, and I'd have my master copy that if I needed to make a change on, and got the eraser out. That was the old school way to do things.
Yeah, I'm old enough that when I was in college the first time, for my first 2 years, there were like word processors. Like I lived in a house with 23 other my fraternity brothers. Nobody had their own computer. But then by the time I went to the Navy and came back to college in the late 90s, like, the internet had happened. Like, granted, it was dial-up, but the internet had happened. Everybody had computers. Like, it was like an entirely different world. So I totally get it.
Well, and I bought my first computer back in '94, and I went to college to learn how to use AutoCAD 10, and it was DOS based. So you used command prompts. You had to type everything in, and my entire computer memory was 256K. I mean, I got thumbnails on the computer that are bigger than that. And you'd watch it regenerate for like 20 minutes. You sat there and twiddled your thumbs, and now I've got a rig here that just my computer alone is $7,000. I've got dual NVIDIA cards in it for rendering. It's a workhorse. And the only CAD computers I will use, it's from a company out of Austin, Texas. It's called The Box, BOXX. And they make computers for CAD design guys that are doing movie editing and that stuff. And I won't go anywhere else. I won't go to HP because they know how to make computers. And I've had this rig for 3 years, and I've never seen it bog down. And I when you get into graphics, my 2 cards can do 20,000 cubicues, which is projecting triangles per second, not minute, but per second. So when I can render a big drawing or a big machine in about 30 seconds. Where my old computer, my laptop sitting here, that was about 10, 15, 20 minutes, sometimes overnight. So
Mm-hmm.
you got the hardware, and I stare at 4 screens. I'm in between 4 screens with Excel spreadsheets, answering emails and whatnot. But the process, I've been doing this since I was 22 years old. I got out of the Army. I was an M1 tank commander. I actually was accepted to West Point in early '83, but I'd met a girl, went home, got married, came back. My commander called me in the office, thought I was in trouble, and he goes, "I got a letter for you." He slid it across the table and opened it up. And says, "Corporal Eilerman, you've been accepted to West Point Preparatory School." And I'm like, "When do I get to go, sir?" And he goes, "Never." I'm like, "Why not? You're married." So I met a girl and married her in a month. I wouldn't have went to the mall that night. I'd have been a West Point grad probably, and Nebula would have never transpired. So
Oh, wow.
we have our path, And if it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't for the Army, Nebula wouldn't be here, because I wouldn't have joined the gym to get back in shape, to go back into the Army. And Jeff Lauber would never ask me to build that first leg press, which looked like a really shitty 7th grade junior high shop project. I'm telling you, I'll have to send that picture to you and put it out on the internet of my first leg press.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
It was bad. It was bad, but I'm famous for the leg press. So go figure. The very first piece of equipment I ever built was a leg press.
That's funny. And yeah, Tom Kenny was telling me about like building like gym equipment out of wood when he was like 12 years old. So it's funny
I thought he was way older than me. When Tom and I don't know if we've ever met, but we've chatted online, and he knows a lot of friends up in New York that I know. But I thought, like, when I was building gym equipment, I got handed an Icarian and a TK Star little 3-page flyer. And I bet I looked at them so much that I rubbed the ink off half the pictures. But then I went to work for Pearl. I learned a lot from Pearlo. I mean, that's where I learned a lot of how to build hardcore. You drilled that into my head so bad that I have a hard time designing something that's not overkill. But
right.
Tom did an amazing job, and he got out of the business. And it was the time that I met Bob Lormer up at World's Gym. Before he had changed it to Metro. And we were the sponsor for the Arnold, like Rogue is now. We would bring in a bunch of equipment and have our booth displays at the Arnold show. We'd help Bob bring all the Nebula equipment to the pump up rooms where the athletes were, pumping up beforehand. They started on the powerlifting meets. They do the bench, deadlift, and that. So I supplied the Nebula benches, and me and Louis Simmons, we'd be up on stage. We'd get to hand the trophies out. So that's back when I was really young. I will be 60 years old on March 9th, so in 2 months. If anybody wants to wish me happy birthday, I officially
happy birthday.
I'm an old man now. But
you're only as old as you feel.
Oh no, I'm most people don't think I'm that old, and I feel good, and I'm still lifting 3-4 times a week. I'm doing the carnivore diet now, so I've changed my diet. I was keto for quite a few years, but I went carnivore, and it's helped with, I'm bipolar, and I was diagnosed a couple years ago, and I was always had these depression bouts and stuff, and never could figure it out. And that could be part of the reason. Actually part of the reason why Nebula ended up failing is because of, I wish I would have got diagnosed 15, 20 years ago. But by the strict diet I'm on, it mitigates any of the effects of bipolar with a very low dose of medication. And, I have no energy fall off. I'm eating beef, butter, bacon, and eggs, and I don't have to have coffee. I'm this chatty and jabbery from the time I get up to the time I go to bed. So anybody wants to check the carnivore diet out, Sean Baker and Ken Berry, all those guys, it's good diet. But anyways, enough of that.
No, that's awesome. And I don't want to like go back and beat this China thing to death, but I just want one more little question.
Hey, no problem.
Because I've used, in almost 300 gyms now, I've used quite a few different manufacturers and quite a few different pieces. And there are some manufacturers out there that people are calling, oh, that's cheap Chinese stuff, or that's Chinese knockoffs is what they're calling them.
Right.
Is it safe to assume that what people are calling Chinese knockoffs is just poor design and not poor manufacturing?
Well, it could be a combination of both, because, even like my boss at TKO, stated to me, there are factories you don't go to, and there are factories you do go to. You know, one of the factories we use is where Hoist is built, and everybody knows Hoist is a top-end product line. And Matrix, you know, Hoist and Matrix are built at one of the factories we build some of our equipment out of. So if you have no problem with Hoist or Matrix, you're not going to have a problem with Defiant Strength. So that tells you the quality level of our product line. But yeah, there are some factories. I mean, we went to a mom and pop bumper shop that looked like a couple old pole barns down the back 40 of Louisiana, right? And looked a little scary around the outside, but you know, they had a nice product. They didn't have the volume, but they had a nice product. But then there's also those companies that will cut corners. I see this gym equipment syndicate online all the time. The guys from India, that these guys are putting out a new piece of equipment like every week, man. They're just cranking it out. But you look at their shop. Their shop looks like, you know, a very small shop, and they go outside and it's gravel, and they got this nice piece of, you know, you can make a nice piece of equipment in a hole. I mean, I've done it already. I mean, my original shop was a hole. But the thing of it is, you got to have quality workers. It boils down to, you got to have the staff first. You can have the greatest equipment to build, manufacture on, but the people got to care about their job. And when I met the people in the factories, they were very polite. The biggest thing I noticed in China was how polite everybody was, from the factory owner, the most wealthy guy in the building, to the guy pushing a broom, you know, around the factory. They would hand you something, like they would hand you this, they hand you two like this, and they bow. And then first time I took it, I was like this. I'm like, well, thank you. And then I watched my boss, Brandon, he did the same thing. So after that, the rest of the trip, if somebody handed me something, I'd take it with two hands and I would bow, because that is extending courtesy to their culture. But you know, Eric, our guy, speaks really good English. He learned it in high school. He's about 46 years old, but he didn't use it for a long time. Then he had to reteach himself. And Eric's been in the fitness business around different manufacturers for 20 years. We've had him working for us for 12. And nice. Then we've got, you know, a couple other guys that work for us, and Jerry's a great guy, but Jerry knows about 4 words: hello, bye, and cheers. When we go out to eat and have a beer, you know. But a lot of the people, you know, Eric was an interpreter at a lot of the factories, but there were some people at the factories, or some of the factories, that spoke very good English, you know. But it's the factory equipment, the protocols, the systems, and I'm talking about the paperwork management, how they manage the product from start A to B, is all tight. But you get a small mom and pop that's doing it like, you know, OCC choppers, you know, you're going to get 129th piece might not be the same as the 50th or the 30th. So right. Yeah, it depends on the quality. And I see a lot of knockoffs. You see, when people try to copy the original Nebula, a lot of times they either they cut corners or they change things so they don't realize why I put it in. And when I owned my factory, we had the gym, and there's about 6 of us at the factory that were meatheads that we trained all the time. So we'd put a piece of equipment in the gym, and we'd be working out on it, and we'd be, what do you think? Oh, this handle sucks. We need to bend it 5 degrees this way or this way. That's why the Nebula leverage line that Arsenal and Dynamic are building in a version of it was so popular. You know, we got sued by Hammer. We had a cease and desist. We had to stop. You know, now you can build them because the patents are gone. But, you know, my handles look pretty funky, but they had a purpose. When you sit in a shoulder press like this, and you got a movement arm down here like this, and you're going to do a parallel grip like this, you're not having the handles like this, because as you go up, you're going to impinge the wrist. This hurts. Right. Yeah. I got my handle is pointing at this really funky, almost straight down, like what? But as soon as you start to press up, you keep that wrist in a neutral position. So as you're lifting up, you want to keep your wrist in a neutral position. So when you're up here like this, you don't want to be like this, or you don't want to be like this. And that's the thing. That's one thing that Dynamic, Tony made the mistake of selling 4 Nebula machines, original Nebula machines, because TJ, oh geez, I'm drawing a blank. Guy from New York, TJ convinced him to sell it to me. He sold them for $2,000 a piece, and you get $5,000 a piece for those pieces. They're rare. We built less than 15 to 20 of each one, and then Tony buys a dynamic. The same piece is a dynamic. The bicep, they change the strength. The bicep machine overall looks the same, but the strength curve is off. It's not the original one. And now the tricep push down, they put the balls on it and they made the backrest adjustable. Those were good improvements. That one's a good one. I like that one. The low row has got different handles than my original one. I like my original one better, but I do like the lower handles on that. But they're just welding the handles together and painting. They're not putting rubber grips on them, which makes them slick. Because I trained over there with the guys the other day, and I had 3 plates of sight on, and it was killing my wedding ring. And and if I was sweaty, I could have never held on to it. See, everything that I'm doing with the Defiant line, we are using 201 polished stainless steel knurled and bent, so it's not welded together. You won't see a handle welded together on mine.
Right.
It's bent. It's one piece. And I like that. And the fact that we're using knurled stainless steel, I'm getting away from the rubber. There are places we just have to use rubber grips on. It is what it is. And not everything needs a stainless steel knurled grip. So, and some of the handles, the first batch of leg presses we did with knurled chrome, I'm going to switch them to knurled aluminum because they'll not tarnish and rust, because eventually the sweat and stuff will make the chrome rust. And our new bench line, we put knurled aluminum. Looks tight, looks really good, and it's a little better for antimicrobial too. I mean, Tom Grace has got the patents with antimicrobial by having the copper handles. I would love to be able to incorporate that in our units, but you'd have to pay a royalty to Tom to be able to do that. So the closest thing is make either stainless steel handles or aluminum handles, get away from the rubber grips, and you've created a forever handle that's not going to be crap. I mean, how many times have you been to the gym and the rubber's half slid off or down, and you're trying to do that pulling a hammer strength, and so. But hopefully that answers your question about China.
Yeah, no, it totally does. Yeah, no, that was great. Is there anything else that you wanted to tell anyone about Defiant Strength, or about anything you're doing now? Like I pretty much, you answered all of my questions. So
okay. Well, and people got an overview. If they want to hear a more in-depth background on me, they need to listen to David Scott's Hybrid Hype second interview with me on it. It gets more into the weeds of everything, but we pretty much cover all the highlights. I'm always a true believer in equipment that's got a purpose, a function. Sometimes I'll spend too much time on something that I maybe not, but I try to make the best piece I can. Now, granted, I've not hit a home run on every single piece of equipment I've ever designed. I've had some abortions, some boat anchors. In fact, there were 2 of them that we went over to look at in China that, like, I'm gonna have to start over from scratch, And sometimes you're not firing on all thrusters. You're just not feeling it, and then you have to come back. And then the second time you come back, it ends up turning into something really good. We've got about 30 products. Like I said, with the Defiant line, we rounded out the athletic line, the racks, the double half racks. What I really like about my double half racks, they're a lot tighter unit. We've got one with a single set of storage between it. We made our safeties 30 inches long, because a lot of safeties on power racks are short, because if you step out a little bit, you're almost out the end. They're a punch hole, so 2 inch on center. So you've got a rogue, J hook of some sort that you want to put on a Defiant rack, it'll work. So we can have other attachments that are made for, 2 inch center, 1 hole, punch hole style racks. They can go on our racks. Our chin bars are knurled stainless. There's no freaking rubber on them. I mean, the stuff just looks tight, and I'm proud of the line. And I would stick it new Defiant against old Nebula any day. And I'd say new Defiant ticks over about 20% better in quality, from the detail and welds to the extra things we're able to do now that we could not do before.
That's awesome.
Just laser cutting tubing. We were sawing tubing and milling it, and I can produce 1 piece of tubing for the cost it used to cost us to mill 2 holes in a piece of tubing. So
that's awesome.
And you can do a lot of things where you can now take the bar, like a hook can now go through the tube to both sides, weld on both sides. So now you're not going to rip the tubing out by a bar ripping off the face of the tube. You've got it all the way through and secured. So there's just a lot of advantage to the manufacturing today than it was back in the late 80s and early 90s, and even the early mid 2000s that I was working. Just all things have changed. But I've got a lot of new product that we're working on. Like I said, we're prototyping all the Olympic benches. We approved the old Nebula power station, which was the with all the plate storage on. Of course, like I said, all my horns and storage are all polished stainless steel with aluminum pressed in end caps. So, they're not got plastic. They're not painted. They look awesome. Just finished my version of a Pit Shark up. Very similar to the Pit Shark in design, except now we'll have a adjustable foot plate so that you can change the angles on it. And I put a dip handle on like Hammer Strength did on their Pit Shark version, so you can do weighted dips off of it. Got a new glute bridge coming out. Vertical leg presses in prototype right now, which would be the Nebula Classic.
Nice.
I'll be working on glute ham, reverse hyper combo, because that's one of the things I designed that I looked at back in April that I scrapped it, but we haven't had time to go back. I spent 6 months on storage bay projects. So like gym racks and TRX and those guys and Torx, they make these modular racks. You've got the uprights and the shelves and all that.
Right. Yeah.
I developed a whole entire line of that with the bridges and all for TKO. That's not part of the Defiant line. That's part of the TKO side. So I'm working on, like high-low pulley systems for that. We're going to have a Smith machine for that. So, I mean, you can literally, and we've got a power rack system, a really nice half rack system that goes with this. It looks like it should be, it's the L slot on this. It looks like it should be a freestanding one. So we've got a lot of versatility in the product that we're offering at TKO. I'm telling you, it is such a great place to work. I found a great Christian company to work. The owners are great to me. They trust my work. I trust their vision, what they're doing. They decided to make Defiant Strength Incorporated. So it's a separate entity owned by TKO. So we make everything in our factories, and TKO sells the product to Defiant. Shane Hensley is our director of sales. Shane lives in Dallas. Shane used to work for Legends and for Dynamic for quite a few years. And he was a pro bodybuilder. He used to compete on the Arnold Classic stage back in the early 2000s. He was coming in at 275 off season and 225 on stage, and he's 5'7". So now he weighs 180 pounds, and he still looks like a brick shit house, But
yeah, 100%.
So and the one thing I ask people to do is, I got a lot of followers on. You see my TKO at Eilerman Tom. Please look up Defiant Strength. You'll see the little orange eagle. Look that up. Start following Defiant Strength, because we need to build up our following on the company. Instagram, Twitter, and all that. I'm not on Twitter, but I am on Instagram, Facebook, and of course LinkedIn. But I need to get people to start following Defiant Strength, and they'll see everything. Karen does a great job, our marketing lady. She's barraging it. I mean, Arsenal really grew. Andrew's wife was great. She was great with marketing. She worked for a big company in marketing, and they did a lot with Instagram, and that really helped them build that company. And I do got to take my hat off. Arsenal's done a great job building a company and a brand. I can't say anything negative about them. I was part of it one time, and the designs, a lot of the designs are either are mine or the roots of some of older things. So I'm proud of the work there, but I'm proud of what I do now, because I'm trying to go back to my roots. I'm trying to take new concepts and mix them together, so we don't have an 80s old school bench all the time. We've got a 2025 bench with the remnants of the hardcore to it. And I think that's a beautiful mix. We chose to stay with the rectangular square tubing, but we're bending it too. So it's not all solid. And, like Rogue took my 1084 bench, my awesome utility bench, and they went back to cutting it so it looks angular. I went back to, I'll send you some pictures or of some stuff. And, or if you watch on some of the reels I've just posted, you'll see some of the new benches.
Yeah.
But, I probably won't even get into Selectorized line until 26 or 27. I mean, I've got so much work ahead of me. So I plan on working until I'm 70 years old. So I got 10 more years, and then I'll I'll still do, as long as I got my gourd and my marbles aren't rolling around from dementia or something, I will. And that's carnivore. Go carnivore, you won't get dementia or Alzheimer's. I'll still be doing contract work for agriculture or fitness because it's in my blood. I love it. I mean, my house is 50 feet from my barn. This morning it snowed, so I had to shovel snow because my employee had to get in the driveway. But if he wasn't working here, I could actually just run through the snow. I can't have an excuse for a snow day. and I built this office 3 years ago, and right before I went in for back surgery, I had back surgery in January of 23. I had dual fusion between S1, L5, L5, and L4, and I was getting to the point where I could not even walk up the steps without doing this to get upstairs to this office. Now I can squat, and I'm doing hacks is a new thing. A big thing I changed in the new hack squat is I added 6 inches to the pad, because the old pad kind of cuts you off in the midriff of your back. This new one now sticks about 2 inches below my butt. So with my fusion, I can lock my pelvis in, and I don't have that pressure on the back. And
nice.
that was somebody had used the Arsenal and an old Nebula at the same gym. They said, Tom, the big thing, if you can do, is add length. And that was feedback from a user, a gym owner from down in somewhere in the Caribbean. And I'm like, really? So it was a great call. And some of these calls are just people saying, hey, you can change this. And it makes sense and it improves your product. Well, heck yeah, we're going to do it. Because ultimately, we want to have the best piece of equipment we can put out on the market.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much. This was an awesome conversation. I think everybody that's lucky enough to listen is going to learn a lot. And love to have you back sometime.
Well, anytime you want. Well, I won't go as long-winded as I this time, but we were trying to lay the groundwork from before and after. And
definitely.
But I kind of look forward, if we can have Tyler and me on like we were supposed to tonight, that'd be great, because Tyler's a great engineer. He's him and Tom Kinney are those names that people still throw around, from the old school days.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. And it humbles all us old guys that people still pay attention to us. And when I found out that people knew my name in other countries, and I'm like, really? I didn't know that. I didn't know that Nebula and my name was known in China and Korea and Spain and Bulgaria. And it was a shock to me 4 years ago when I found that out. So I'm humbled that all the hard work that I've done in my career, people still recognize it. And I hope I can pay homage to that honor by still putting out really good equipment for everybody.
You built some awesome pieces. So
God says be humble, and that's the way to be. It was gifts and hard work that he put in my lap and situations that honed those skills. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be sitting where I'm at today either.
Yeah. So, you built some awesome pieces, and it's no surprise to me that people are still excited about what you're doing. And I'm sure that this will be something they'll be excited to see. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks a lot, Chris. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more great content.